and I'm grateful to have had two opportunities to work in this district. Dr. Wade and I have spent a lot of time together today trying to piece together all the different aspects of making certain that the board understands where we are in terms of our schools and the positive cases and the exposed cases and those sorts of things, and then where we're going. So I'm going to lead you to a place, and then I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Wade, and he's going to tell you where we're going as a district in the future. One of the biggest issues that I think has plagued us in the public and within the district is being able to understand the difference between individuals who are quarantined and individuals who are isolated. Quarantine is not the same as positive. So when you see that number is going to be large. And a lot of the reason behind that is Dr. Cooper, Mr. Hinton, those folks that are working with our nurses, they have been diligent about over-identifying rather than under-identifying. So please don't look at the quarantine and say, well, that's a positive. No, it isn't. By definition, it is someone who has been in close contact with a known positive, but sometimes it's just somebody says, I think I was, and we'll identify them as well so that we don't miss anybody. Now, those people who are in isolation, they have a known positive. They have been tested. We have had Dr. Cooper gets a notification that they were positive. DHEC gets a notification that they were positive, and that becomes an isolation case. I'll also tell you that in some cases, isolation, quarantine has been dropped back to 7 days. We have not. We're still at 10 days. We want to make absolutely certain that we don't have any cases out there pending where it might be in the classroom and us not know that. As for the reporting and how that goes, because there's been comments about that just aren't accurate. If I go to have a COVID test and my test is positive, then the testing agency, whether it's my doctor, whether it's a drive-through, whatever, they're required to report that to DHEC. In addition, if you work in our district, you're required to report that to Dr. Cooper. If it's a student in our district, it goes to Mr. Hinton. Once that happens, if it goes through DHEC, they'll start a form 1129, which is a close contact form. To make sure that that's covered to the biggest extent possible, Dr. Cooper starts an 1129 also. And she'll ask me, who do you think you've been in close contact with? Have you been in the truck with Don? Have you had lunch with Dr. Wade? Have you and Danette been in the same building? And starts to make a list. And everybody who thinks that they're close contact or who actually is close contact, we identify those people, and they have gone into quarantine. Now, again, we keep that at the 10 days, and I have put out some papers for you, and if you look over all the time since August, the number of individuals who have been identified as a close contact, a quarantine person, is about 90%, maybe 95% in some cases, larger than the number of people who are positive for any case. And I've got some information for you just to look at. I don't mean for us to go through every line of it tonight, and if you have questions, certainly you can come by and talk to me. You can come by and talk to Dr. Wade, Dr. Cooper, Jim, whomever. But if you look, there's a sheet that is kind of beige and gray, has every school listed by staff. If you look down at the very bottom where it says total, we've had 6 positive teacher cases. Now, we've had 35 teachers that have been quarantined, identified as close contact, but only 6 positive teacher cases out of all of the teachers in the district. If you go to the gray area, that represents everyone who isn't a classroom teacher. There were 5 of those individuals who were positive, and there were 14 others that were isolated as a close contact. If you look at the sheet that is stapled that has multiple pages, it's a report out of Mr. Hinton's office, and some of the information we have is duplicated. But what happens is you see every school, the number of positive students, which in the district there have been 33 identified, the number who are quarantined because of close contact, and that's 297 district-wide, and then the percentage for each school. We're maintaining that 10% that we set. Now, part of the issue I think the board needs to understand, Dr. Wade and I were talking coming in, we looked at the DHEC reporting for flu. We have to call DHEC when we have 20% of flu in there, but we set 10%, which is a pretty low threshold in some cases, but we feel like that's one that should get our attention. And as you all are aware, we put Wood into a virtual situation today as we agreed on in our process. The good thing I think about our process is the fact that while one school may be virtual, other schools are continuing to operate. And we've got a lot of other issues that go along with our kids that are not necessarily educational related. There's some information there about educationally related and how we're doing or not doing academically, but by the same token, we know that there is an emotional and psychological effect on either coming or not coming. We know that for a lot of our kids there are issues with lunches and breakfasts and dinners and snacks, and by the way, we're doing the feeding program for Wood. The transportation folks and the food services folks at Sodexo have gotten together today, and so they're going to continue to do that. But there are a lot of moving parts that go along with our kids. Now, if you look at the sheet that is 2 columns, and one says requesting in person, one virtual, short and sweet to that, we have 257 kids district-wide that are asking to come back face-to-face, 138 kids that are requesting virtual. So it's not quite 2 to 1, but almost 2 to 1 the number of students that want to come back face-to-face at this point. And then the last sheet, the colored sheet, and you can tell it came out of the instructional department because it has lots of primary colors and colored pencils and all those things that those folks do. But the information there is those by school, those students requesting in person or virtual. We also have for our core courses that are end of course courses, Algebra 1, Biology 1, English 2, and U.S. History, we have the numbers of kids who are at the A level, the B level, C level, D level, and F level on the Common Formative Assessment Test. Now, as you'll remember, the Common Formative Assessment is not a statewide test. It's a test that was manufactured by our teachers. So by and large, we would hope our kids did really well on that, and you can see those results. Down at the very bottom, you see the 2 high schools and the number of students in the second quarter that have grades below a 60. But anyway, again, I don't want to spend all of the time on this because the workshop is about the building program, but I do want to give the board an update. Dr. Wade, and I'll let him speak for himself, is committed that he will give the board an update every time the board meets on this situation, and he has some thoughts about where he might be looking at after the Christmas break. Of course, with all going on, I don't know if Dr. Wade's going to get much Christmas break, but Dr. Wade, anything I've left out or you want to add, please do.
No, it was very proficient. It was very proficient. I think the few things I'd kind of like to add about when we kind of get back from Christmas break, I think given what the last week that we've been able to kind of either observe or kind of be a part of, something I kind of like to throw out there to the board is perhaps something that we could do for all of our stakeholders is maybe have perhaps more frequent workshops or meetings or whatever we wish to call them, but maybe the only agenda item is frankly, all matters related towards our return to learning, whether it's face-to-face, virtual, or what have you. And I think that might be very meaningful because I think while the board is very much aware and involved and very much reflective about what is transpiring within the district, perhaps having a public opportunity and venue for our stakeholders to observe might be beneficial. I don't know how I just kind of threw that matzo ball out there, but it's something that I think that might be very beneficial for us as we return. Plus, I just like being a social butterfly with all of you. So this could be a very, valuable opportunity, I think, moving forward beginning in January. One other item is that we know we have a lot of information on our website, and one thing that I'm working with Dawn on is really kind of working on a web page and site that we can do our best to centralize everything and very clearly for people to kind of get access to information, numbers, metrics, and really break down what all that is. I think we all know, as Dr. James was talking about, there is some confusion about like what does quarantine mean, and some people very understandably have that immediate gut reaction that if someone's quarantined, they're almost like an inevitable positive, and that's not always the case. So we're looking at trying to have something on the website that's easy for everyone to navigate in a one-stop shop, including like technology resources, anything involving food services, mental health services, what our e-learning expectations and plans are, but something that's at least accessible to any and everyone that they can kind of have a one-stop shop to. And moving forward, especially something I think over the winter break, a frequent question that's been posed to both Dr. James and myself is, how are we going to be able to monitor the numbers, especially when, frankly, no one's in school or at the district office? And one of the things that we're going to have to be looking at is really looking at, really kind of put on the math hat right here and really look at what the numbers are showing us from after the Thanksgiving break, and really kind of do some sort of correlation with what we're seeing with, county or community numbers and try and make an estimate about where we're kind of at, should we come back on January 4th. As well as we're going to continue to encourage our staff to continue following procedures about if they become notified of being in close contact or actually testing positive, and make those determinations to determine what's going to be best for students and staff. And I really kind of want to stress what, to me, virtual learning is, where if we have to move to virtual learning, then that means that at that particular learning site that there is an actual spread that really we're trying to mitigate to the best of our ability. So if I were to have a school, whatever school that may be over winter break, that I feel is kind of reaching that 10% threshold, exceeding it, or we have a difficulty in staffing it upon our return, essentially then I'd say then we're going to shift to a remote learning environment, and we're going to be shutting that school down, meaning we're not going to be holding any activities, events, or sports or anything like that in order to make sure that we mitigate the spread to the best of our ability, so that way we can return after the 14-day quarantine period. That is essentially where my line of thinking is. Dr. James, is there anything I've forgotten?
One thing that Dr. Wade and I talked about earlier, and the board needs to be aware, Dr. Wade mentioned finding substitutes and that sort of thing. Just bluntly, there has been a lot of misinformation out there, and we've got a subgroup that they're concerned. And we've done a lot today, and I think Dawn has done a lot trying to get out information about what numbers really are, but there's been a lot of stuff thrown out that is not not altogether accurate, which has created a problem as far as being able to put substitutes in classrooms. And I think ultimately Dr. Wade is right. If we are not going to be able to fill the classrooms, then virtual is the only option that we have. And so At this point, we aren't there, but, the board needs to be aware that there are a lot of moving pieces to this, a lot of moving parts to this, and dealing with an individual school or numerous schools is an effort to mitigate any kind of exposure or any further spread. And right now, as much information as we do. What you have is accurate information. It's based on data from DHEC. I can't imagine that anybody would say that school officials wouldn't report medical data, but even if we were of that caliber integrity, you can't bypass DHEC. So the numbers you have are the numbers that we have. And our overall take is we're going to have school face to face, and I think it's appropriate that we do it across the board. I can't tell an elementary teacher you're exposed to 22 children and you stay exposed to those 22 children and then tell other folks that we need to do a different model. That's not reasonable. But right now we have subs. We're moving forward, but again, this is my last board meeting, so it's not going to make a whole lot of difference what I think. But for the record, I do support Dr. Wade in the fact that if it gets to the point where we can't get subs, then he has no choice other than to put school on virtual so we can operate. But anyway, Mr. Eisenhower has a PowerPoint that he has worked diligently on. If you have questions about anything at all, Dr. Wade and I'll be more than glad to talk to you, give you further information, and you'll be getting updates on a regular basis. So thank you, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. And as you all know, we have a lot of people in this room who are tracking day and night, so we want to keep that in mind. Mr. Eisenhower is going to do the update on the Performing Arts Building, but we have plenty of time to get with Dr. James, Dr. Wade, and Mr. Eisenhower. If we have any questions, then we'll also have additional time in January for that before the regular scheduled January meeting. So I think we would all agree that we'll hold questions and discussions and receive the presentation from Mr. Eisenhower, and then we'll go from there. So thank you. And
thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. James, Dr. Wade. We want to take an opportunity to present to you the latest information that we have with regard to the new Performing Arts Center that we've been working to design. I also want to just reinforce what Madam Chair said. Just a few months ago, we offered up the opportunity for our board members to go and look at a project in Columbus, Georgia, the Evans project, and it is a facility very similar to what we're building in size and in design. I think ours looks better, and I think ours will function better, but at the same time, if any of you have interest in going to look at that facility, they were actually supposed to finish this month. So we will inquire and we will see if we can arrange for another visit. If any of you, I know we have 2 new board members, and we had a couple of board members to go previously, and if any of you have interest in going, just let me know, and we will inquire and see if we can make that happen. I do also want to say that if any of you have any questions about any of this and you don't want to ask it today, I am certainly available anytime to talk to you about any questions you might have about this project. With that said, we'll step right into the PowerPoint presentation, and this is basically some information that you received previously from the architect that's updated. I want to go into this. This is the site plan, And what we have here is, this is 12th Street Extension. This is Saks Gotha. And we're right on the corner of 12th Street Extension and Saks Gotha. This is the Dominion Energy campus back here. I will say that in thinking through this, this is actually the 5th location that we considered before purchasing this property. The first property that we considered was a property that we currently own at George I. Pear, and we determined that that property was not large enough. This particular piece of property is about 28 acres. It already had a lot of site work on it that was done, and it was a very attractive piece to us. And if you have questions about where those other sites were, I'll be happy again to talk to you on an individual basis and talk to you about what sites we considered prior to choosing this one. This is just showing you in reference to the Performing Arts Center, which is the darker yellow, and the district office, which is the lighter yellow. District office is basically pointing north and south. The Performing Arts Center faces east and west. This is the floor plan, which you can't see, but it is the first and second floor. One of the things that I do want to point out is that we have the boardroom here on first floor, and that shares part of the lobby. You see in this drawing that there is and you'll see in our fly-through later, that it's showing a divider here. This divider has now been taken out, so this lobby is one large lobby. This is the receptionist area. The entrance into the district office will be from this direction, and the parking in the back. I also want to point out that the boardroom is probably at least twice the size of our existing boardroom. And right above that, we have a multi-purpose room that we are going to try to include in the base package for bid. And the reason we're trying to do that is to make sure we have plenty of breakout space for this particular facility. Again, trying to add as much flexibility to how this property or this facility might be used down the road. This gives you the Performing Arts Center first floor. And what you see here is the arena, and there are 3 different levels of seating. This lower level seats somewhere around 1,000, maybe 1,000 to 1,100. Don't have the exact number yet. The stage itself is large enough to where that we could put the largest graduating class that we've had in the last few years on the stage if we so desired, and we would be able to give each graduate 7 to 8 tickets for their family members to attend the graduation if you decided that you wanted to have an indoor graduation at this facility. Also want to point out that this lobby is very different. For those of you that went to the Evans on the Evans visit, you may notice that this is much more open, much more user-friendly than what we saw at Evans. This is actually large enough if you wanted to have, let's say, a business banquet or something like that, you could have that out in this space and have plenty of room to do that. One of the things that, again, we're trying to work in is we're trying to add some multi-purpose rooms here and here, again, for breakout areas, and in the event that we had something going on in here in the arena or the auditorium itself, we are trying to set these up to where that they could practice if we had, let's say, a theater production or a choral presentation or something that's going to be taking place this Friday, but let's say on Wednesday we had some big event taking place in here, then they would be able to work a practice into one of these rooms. We also have a scene shop, a green room, an office, multiple bathrooms at each level, and there are 3 different levels. This is the loading dock area, and you can see there's a straight path from the loading dock onto the stage, which is very important in this design. These are all dressing rooms that are designed for a large professional production in the event that we decide that we wanted to do that. And again, you can notice the close proximity of this lobby to the boardroom, which is right there. Here's the second floor of that same facility. You can see that we have mechanical rooms, but these are actually going to be done more on the outside with covers. Again, this was a value engineering item that we've already put in place to try to save some money. And the seating is here. You notice also that we have bathrooms at this level, and we have a second lobby up here, and a little collaborative space here that could be used for a presentation. Again, if we were to have, let's say, a business convention or something, or a professional development workshop where that we might bring in some national speaker or something, this could be a breakout area. This is also where that you would access the multipurpose room that we're trying to include in the base bid that's above the boardroom. Right there, that room is. And all of this lobby overlooks the lower level lobby down there, which makes it very attractive. Here's the third floor. And again, you can see that this is a stairwell, but we have restrooms built into this area, just like we have on the other levels. Here's the most recent rendering. One of the value engineering items that we've already put into place. You saw in our other renderings, you may not remember, but this stone around the lower part of the front that we still have maintained was all the way around the perimeter of this building, and that in itself was a very expensive item. So we have decided to take that out of the base bid and just include it in the front. Now, one of the things that I want you to notice is that the architect is including an amphitheater out front. And the reason being is because there's a difference in elevation from this road up to the finished floor level, from this parking lot up to that finished floor level. So they've put this in basically as an aesthetic type thing that would be very attractive. It is one of the things, though, that we're going to want to get input from you if it comes down to value engineering. This is something that we may want to consider taking out. But right now it's in the base bid. Mentioned to you previously that the district office entrance would be from the back side. This is that entrance where that you come in, and the district office reception area would be just inside that window right there. And this is the basically a cut through of those 3 levels that we just presented to you. This being the backstage, this is the stage, and you can see it has a fly loft. And this being the first level of seating, second level of seating, third level of seating. Lobby area out here. And Bernie, if you will hit the return, and I can do it, and it'll do the fly through. Hey, this is pretty cool. There's the stage. Seating levels. We're going to go into the lobby. Notice the upper lobby and the lower lobby and the stairs going up. Leaves a lot of open space out in that lobby. Okay. This is the landscape plan for this site. And you have not seen this as a board, so we wanted to, again, bring you the most recent and current drawings that we have. You notice the green, those are all trees. This is that amphitheater that we talked about, a little green space out front. The back parking also has trees, just like every other level of parking. And again, this is where the loading dock would be, where the trucks would back in if we had a large performance. Sorry, I went too far. This is a close-up of that amphitheater, the landscaping for that. The back area, a close-up for landscaping. And now you say, well, how did we get to where we are? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background, and this is more for the newer board members than for those that are more experienced, but it is good to have a reminder sometimes to kind of get to where, so everybody can understand kind of where we were and how we got to where we are. So some of the board of trustees and community members made the Performing Arts Center idea a priority. And this was something that was discussed by task force members. I think several of our board members, I know Bud, you were on it. I think Christina and some of y'all were on this task force that went out and talked about passing this bond referendum. It was so important to the group and to the district that this facility was listed as a question on the 2014 bond referendum. The original question included a 1,000-seat facility. Early discussion about having funds. We had some early discussion about having enough funds to enlarge this facility, and that led to the potential of us having 3,000 seats to host a graduation. What we realized is that, we started looking at the schematic drawings that we could not afford to do 3,000 seats. So at that point, we kind of turned our attention to, and we started talking about building the largest facility that we could afford to build, and again, with our thoughts that we might have graduation and other large events that could open the door or opportunities for our students. In part of the planning process, we pulled in a representative group from each school in the fine arts, performing arts, and we talked about what do we need to do to make sure that this facility gets used. And every one of them said that it has to be nicer than what we have at the school level in order for us to take the time to move from the school over to this facility. And so we have done everything we could do with our design to make it nicer than what they have and to give them lots of opportunities. We were also asked at some point in time about have the bonds been sold for this particular project. All of the bonds were sold in the bond referendum as of October 2017. So all the bonds have been available for use since that time, and we've been drawing interest on that money during all of these construction projects. Purpose of the Performing Arts Center. As you know or you may not know, we still have some schools that actually don't have stages. So there's no way for them to do an in-house production of any type because their cafeterias don't have stages. We have built cafetoriums for actually several of our schools. But in most cases, those aren't large enough to host large audiences for some of our bigger schools especially. And typically, you don't build a cafetorium that's large enough to host a big event like a big, let's say, a Christmas production that they might have, because it's just not cost effective to do that for every facility when you knew you were going to eventually build a district-wide auditorium. Also, this facility that we're talking about will put our student in the forefront of any district, county, or state performances. So we might be able to have or host lots of things from a county-wide standpoint, a district standpoint, or a state standpoint, and be able to get our students involved much more easily. Also, to expose our students to events or shows that they might not otherwise experience. I think if you were to ask our students, they would tell you that a lot of them have never been to the Coker Center. They've never been to a theater production or anything like that at the Coker Center, and that's just across the river. So part of what we had talked about previously was when we had big events in this facility, part of the agreement would be that they would do some sort of day performances to allow some of our students to be able to come and see those productions. Also, in looking at the potential uses of this, it places an equal emphasis on the arts in comparison to other programs. We have nice facilities for a lot of other programs, and this just puts that same exclamation point on our arts programs. It gives us the ability to expand curriculum opportunities. It allows us to host indoor graduations. It improves our ability to be a school district of choice for current and future families. And this is something that we've talked about ever since Dr. James came. We know that it's a competition. We're in constant competition with private schools, charter schools, and other school districts for where those families want to live. So we think this, again, gives us that extra facility that will draw more attention to this is why you should come to Lexington School District 2. Also, this facility has the ability to be an economic boost for our local economy, depending upon how you choose to make it available for use. About May or June, I guess it was maybe even later than that, you asked us to do some research on how we might use this facility. And I will give Dr. Wade credit because he took that opportunity and started reaching out to a lot of different groups. So we've either met in person or online with representatives from the Coker Center. We had a production promoter that handles the Coker Center and the township. We met with some folks that are called Experience Columbia that also provided us with some advice on how this facility might be used. We talked to food vendors to talk about how we might be able to have concession stands or handle a banquet or something like that in the event that you decided you wanted to open it up for that type of use. We met with local municipality leaders to just make sure that they understood what we were looking at doing. And we met with a convention center board member to get more information about what that facility was capable of hosting. Sure.
Just something to kind of add on is probably proof that my wife, who's involved in hospitality, that I do actually listen to her when she talks about work, where there's been a myriad of uses that have been proposed by board members, since I arrived here on August 1st about potentially what the Performing Arts Center could be in addition to programming opportunities for our students. And one of the things is that we kind of went out there was really kind of understand what goes into all these potential uses. I know in the next few slides we're kind of going to briefly hit upon some things that we discovered, but even very basic things, like I'm just going to pull up concessions. So imagine if you wanted to sell a thing of popcorn, the amount of regulations and space and plumbing needed just for popcorn it's oh man. I mean, that kind of threw us off guard, where you would almost need to have a sink and cleaning area that's almost the space of these two tables. So there would be those additional costs that go into it, and things that we probably wouldn't have thought of until we were engaging in those conversations with people. We also wanted to know, in addition to, we know how we could use it for programming opportunities for our students, community, and other stakeholders. But, you know, there have been a lot of other suggestions about, you know, type of performing arts or other types of opportunities to be exposed to, whether they're plays or musicals or concerts or whatever it may be. And we really want to have an idea, is there even a need for that? And I think in our conversations with people that we really got that really narrowed down, and as opposed to, I know everyone's quick to think, oh, you could have Wicked. In theory, you could, but that's not exactly something that we'd realistically be able to get because of all the relationships and existing relationships of other venues like the Koger Center. And even for like concert series, it might be to a varying extent, but now you also have the Columbia Speedway. So it really helped in terms of, you know, understanding those particular priorities, but it also goes into additional cost, personnel, or services that can go in with that. So we feel like as we are engaging in all those wonderful conversations, we have a very good idea about if there was a direction the board wanted to go into, that we could, I think, properly inform you what that would entail, just so everyone's aware and to determine what would be the best course forward.
Yeah, and we have heard very loud and clear from the board that this facility is to be for students first, and we're designing it for that purpose. But as I have done with all of our facilities, I've tried to design with flexibility to give the board and the stakeholders more options in the event that they wanted to go and use it in other ways. As far as potential uses, you would have the ability to host school or district-wide events like art shows, choral concerts, orchestra, band concerts, dance recitals, theater productions, etc. It gives you the ability to host county, district, state performances or competitions. Now, when we start talking about, let's say, district, for instance, we've talked about, I've heard Dr. James mention, you know, having a winter song, to where that you bring all of the schools in and let them do a major presentation to a huge audience so that they could have that exposure, and all of our parents would have the opportunity to sit in a comfortable seat and watch their children perform. Countywide, we could set up, countywide choral, where to make it a competitive type thing, and bring in the best of the best, and put on a production in this facility that would be second to none. Also, you have the ability to host regional, state, or national conferences for professional development. You've heard Dr. James talk many times about how much money we put into sending people to national conferences. This facility gives us the ability to bring those national conferences to Casey and West Columbia. And that's where we mentioned previously it has the ability to be an economic boom to our local economy. Those people stay in motels, those people eat in restaurants, those people shop, they participate in recreational things while they're in town, and it just gives you the ability to do those types of things.
Something to add on to the professional development, I think, as the board knows, or our new board members will probably soon find out at some point, is that professional development is extraordinarily costly. And even depending on what your proximity is to where some of these other companies are able to get to, there could be additional costs incurred for just even bringing one or two people out, which then limits the amount of exposure that you can bring to your staff. So, which affects then initiative, timelines, quality of PD, or what have you. But the state of South Carolina is really starting to dip its toe and foot into some larger initiatives. I can tell you, based off my own experience, really would be an inevitable PD. I don't want to say whole, but I mean, it could be a potential cost at some time. And we're talking about co-teaching, which is now increasingly becoming a learning placement on students' IEPs, and that's a whole different thing we don't need to get into at this point, but I'm happy to answer your questions about that. But you have MTSS, we've definitely been piloting, exploring standards-based reporting, which inevitably leads to competency-based education. And those are just a very few things about where public education is going, what the state is looking at. And Lexington 2 could be that centralized location for the state of South Carolina, even outside of South Carolina, where we'd be a lot more accessible and more, I don't want to put down other cities like, but people don't want to drive, to Atlanta or go up to Washington DC or Philadelphia, which is where a lot of the PD opportunities have been, that we could actually bring that, house it here, and have the space to do so, and hopefully get a reduced fee or free admissions for our staff and administrators.
Yeah, and one of the things, again, that separates us from the others is that we will have on-site parking, which is extremely difficult. Several of you have been to business conferences, you've been to teacher conferences and so on and so forth, and you know that parking is at a premium when you go to any event like that. So we will have that on site. We also have the ability to host small business conventions. Professional theater. Now, we have determined that, as Dr. Wade mentioned previously, we're probably not going to be bringing in off-Broadway, but there are a lot of levels of professional theater that are appealing to people that you would be able to bring here and make it attractive for people to come. Children's theater, we've had them to approach us multiple times about wanting to be able to use some of our facilities to do that. And what kind of opportunities or chances does that give our students when you've got a professional children's theater right here in our district that could create some of the next big actor or actress to go on Broadway. So, it just really opens up a lot of things for our students. Concerts, we've already mentioned that. Business banquets, we've mentioned, and community events. Now, this is the area that we wanted to talk to you about, and that's what funding is available for this particular facility. And I will say that you notice that some of these numbers are italicized. Here, from here down, basically, those are all italicized because those are right now predictions. And you want to note what this thing at the bottom that we say here, it's all based on financial advisor report from January 30th of 2020. A lot of things have changed since then. We don't know the full impact of what they will have on these numbers, but we feel pretty confident. When Marty and I did these, we were pretty conservative with what we placed in here. So we feel comfortable with what we've got on this list. Basically, you have $22 million left of bond referendum money that we salvaged by using CPIF funds, using interest, using various things, other revenues to be able to put into the facilities that we've already completed. You have $3.1 million in uncommitted funds, and what that means is basically that would be contingencies and things like that that have been returned to the district on projects. For instance, Casey Elementary right over here is a good example. Thompson Turner did that building. They gave back to us. They built in a 5% contingency, and they gave most of that 5% back to us, which equated to about $1.8 million that went into this fund as uncommitted. So that's kind of how we came up with the uncommitted funds. The capital projects fund balance, that is the money that is carryover money every year. Marty, you correct me if I'm wrong, but basically if we have any money left over from the general fund at the end of the fiscal year, it rolls over into this capital projects fund balance. And then you as a board have the ability to help us decide how to spend that money based on recommendations from whomever makes the presentation to you, which is typically Marty or myself or Dr. James or Dr. Wade, or even from instruction. Anything to add to that?
Not all of the general fund rollover goes into this. There's a portion of it. It's a calculation as part of board policy. And so a portion of it goes here, the balance of it would go to just those plain
Okay, and then this year, we set aside $3.5 million for maintenance, for computer refresh, and for basically the one-to-one computer replacement, as well as replacement of activity buses. That $3.5 million is set aside, so what we have left for the next 5 or so years, we're putting toward this facility. So you have $2.6 million that's left after our CPIF budget has been used to maintain our facilities and computer technology. That was initially sold in bonds. That, I guess, the 3.5 plus that. And I told you earlier, and the new board members may not have been on board when we talked about this, but I told you that Marty caught a situation that would have totally put an end to your 2030 plan, because we had not sold enough bonds based on what was recommended by our financial advisor. And as a result, you were going to have to lower your millage rate, which would have given you less money in the long run to be able to do your long-range facilities plan. So as a result of Marty being on top of it, we issued an additional $1.1 million. That's where it's 2021B. So we issued that extra $1.1 million to add to that $2.6 million. So that is available now. We're projecting next year there would be $3.3 million. The year after that, $4 million. The year after that, $4.3 million. The year after that, $4.7 million. Now, again, those are italicized because they are estimates at this point in time. And you might say, well, how are we going to come up with all that money? Because you're going to show us in a few minutes that we're going to be finished in June of 2023. And we've got another year here. Well, Marty and I have talked about the possibility of selling short-term bonds, basically, for a 5-year period that would give you this money up front to be able to put toward this project. Now, we're hoping that we don't have to use all of this, but we're planning just in case that we need it. Also, you've sold the district office for $3,120,000. There's the extra money that will go toward this. That's that $3 million that we've already gotten $1 million of it. And then in addition to that, out of the capital projects fund balance for the next 3 years, we're looking at putting $1.5 million each year toward this project. And then the one thing that we are not calculating is how much interest are we going to make on all of this during these next couple of years while this is being constructed. This all totals $60,114,066, which is what we potentially have to go toward this project. Now, hard costs, we obviously can't spend that kind of money, hard costs. There will be a lot of furniture and equipment that will be needed to go into this. There will be design fees that goes into this. You know, we've given you previously about a $50 million hard cost number. And then you have all the extra things that go into this for furniture and equipment. For instance, coil risers and things like that you have to have, extra chairs, so on and so forth. Furniture for the district office, all of that comes into play. Okay, well, you say, well, what if? What if we can't, if it comes in higher than what we thought? Well, what are we going to do? Well, we're going to go back at that point and we're going to look at value engineering and trying to figure out, again, how do we give you the biggest bang for the money and make sure that we give you the foundation that you need to build around. I mentioned to you several multi-purpose rooms. One that is above the boardroom, which we are going to include that in the base bid, as I mentioned previously. The other two multi-purpose breakout rooms that we showed you, those are going to be bid as an alternate. So in other words, if the bid comes in low enough, we will include those as part of the base bid package. If not, then those will be taken out and they can be added into the 2030 plan and figured in, and you can build them if the desire is there in the pay-as-you-go method that we've explained to you in the 2030 plan. Also, one of the things that we have an option on is there are 3 different possibilities for an orchestra pit. Right now, we have, I would say, next to the best one that makes this facility the most attractive to a professional orchestra if we wanted to bring any of those in. But if the need is there for us to look at budget costs, then that is one that we will certainly consider. Also, something that we can consider is parts of the sound and light package. This facility has about $3.5 to $4 million light and sound package in it. It is state of the art. It is really nice. So, but if we have to, that's something that we can look at. Also, I mentioned to you, and I don't have it on the list, and that's that amphitheater that is out front. One of the things that we feel like that we can cut, but that we're doing everything we can do to protect, because we feel like this is the foundation for this facility. You can't go back and add seats, ever. So if we don't build the number of seats that you need now, you're stuck with that number forever and ever for the life of this facility. So we've done everything we can do to protect the number of seats that we have in there, and we're going to try to build around those seats if need be. You might say, well, and I've heard some of you say, well, how does this affect the 2030 plan? Let's say if we decided that we didn't want to build this facility. Well, I'm going to tell you, this Performing Arts Center is the foundation of that 2030 plan. For those of you that have been on the board a while, you've heard me go through workshops multiple times. The difficulty that you're going to have in getting to the first available monies that are large enough to build and start replacing a school is about an 8 to 10 year period. You're going to have difficulty spending the amount of money that you have to spend during that period of time so that you will have the ability, the borrowing power to hit those schools at the level that you need it to be so that you can start replacing those schools that didn't get replaced this time with the bond referendum. This Performing Arts Center takes care of 6 years of that, up to 6 years. So that means that you've only got about 2 or 3 years now that you go back and you do things, and you could go back as part of those 2 or 3 years, and you could build those extra multi-purpose rooms if we don't include them in the base bid. So there's method to this madness, and I want to make sure you understand that it's all laid out for you. You just need to follow the plan, and we'll answer any questions that you have about that at any point in time. And again, we go back to any design modifications other than seating. They can be restored through the adjustments to the 2030 plan, which is the pay-as-you-go plan. One of the things, though, that you need to understand is that part of your 2030 plan, we've identified a couple of campuses where that we need to purchase adjoining properties to make that site suitable for a school replacement down the road. You're going to need money to be able to buy those properties that adjoin those schools. You may need to look at, and we actually have some of our properties right now under contract for sale, Granby in particular. That money is going to need to go toward the purchase of those adjoining properties down the road. So it's going to need to go into a fund, and Marty and I have talked about that we need to make sure that that money is available to do what we need to do to set your 2030 plan up like it needs to be set up. Opportunities for students beyond the arts. Obviously, we've talked about some curriculum expansion. It has the ability with those multi-purpose spaces, if we can afford to do those, to do an arts innovation center type program. Right now you have an arts magnet program at the elementary level and the middle school level, and they somewhat follow through at the high school level, but this again puts the exclamation point on that arts magnet program, and it gives good flow all the way through the high school. We mentioned to you previously that with those multi-purpose areas, those can also be used as meeting spaces. Any event that you wanted to host, a student leadership or a business entrepreneurial type thing for our students. I've heard Dr. Wade talk about there's some discussion about a student leadership charter school taking place or being built somewhere in the Columbia area. You're ahead of the game. You could have that type of program and put on those displays in the facility that we're talking about.
And this is kind of where the discussion with the board, I think, can really go in a lot of creative directions, because if we opted at the Performing Arts Center and be focused and kind of have a fine arts innovation center, what we see here, but for our students, after they, attend Saluda and Busby, and it kind of has this capstone over here, it even opens up other opportunities at existing facilities, like at both the high schools, where in theory they can open up other spaces within those buildings that maybe could be reutilized for other types of programs as a result of us having a fine arts one here. Like, there's a lot of creativity and come of it, and there's almost that domino effect, which kind of just leads to those types of fun what-if conversations. And I think even having an opportunity for like a K-12 fine arts one, it's already interesting for me, since coming here in August, upon like one of the first presentations out here about the Performing Arts Center. It's interesting to me how it's gotten other people excited, not just for the prospect of a K-12 fine arts program, but also for the idea that if we can do it for fine arts, why can't we do it for STEM and other types of programming opportunities? And I think everyone knows that I'm definitely all for that, but I think this really assists in having that conversation.
You may or may not remember, but our student government at Airport is slated to host the national convention in 2022. Now, this facility won't be finished in time to do that, be part of that. But it, again, makes you attractive to those types of events, more so than ever before. And again, local, state, and national competitions. Timeline. You've already approved the schematic designs, or SDs is what we call them, at a previous board meeting. The next thing that we will be bringing to you will be what we call the DDs. Those are design development plans. That will be presented to you at the January board meeting. They're slated to be finished by the architect next week. They're going to go to the contractor. The contractor will then basically put those things out for bid by selective subcontractors. They will then get an idea of where we are on costs for this facility. And I told you previously that right now there's a 5% contingency in for construction, and there's a 5% contingency built in for design. Once we get through the CDs, which is the construction documents, that 5% design contingency goes away. So now we're down to from 10% contingency to a 5% contingency, and we start bringing that number back in line with where you're expecting. We're hoping to have an early site package to go out for bid in April. And the construction documents, which we're calling the CDs, those are due in June of 2021. The estimated substantial completion for this facility is June of 2023. Now, we could beat that by a few months, if we had good weather and good luck and all that, or we could possibly go beyond that, but I don't think we'll go beyond that. So that's for substantial completion, and for those of you that have followed through in our construction, you know that when you get substantial completion, you still got punch list items that you need to take care of. So this gives us an extra 2 months to take care of those punch list items, and your first big event could be scheduled in here for August of 2023. Now that's important, because some of these professional productions are 2 years out on scheduling, which means that in the next 6 months, I mean, you're 2.5 years away from opening this facility. In the next 6 months, we're going to have to decide exactly how we're going to start looking at using this facility so that we can, if we're going to bring in professional productions, we got to start getting on some folks' timelines and schedules. And with that, Madam Chair, I conclude my remarks. You too.
Thank you. I didn't have my mic on, so
You
thank
better
you for
say
that. That was very good information, and I'm glad we were able to bring our 2 new board members up to speed tonight. And I think some of us received some additional information as well. So thank you for that, and thank you for the back-to-school update that we had earlier, and for going into more detail about that, and for being committed to more regular updates. So unless anybody has anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion by Ms. Kessler and a second by Mr. Bray. All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Meeting is now adjourned.